Williams to share her memories of the Countess. Welcome.
First of all, Cheryl, thank you for inviting me. I'm deeply honored and thrilled to be here. Thank you to the board members who are volunteering their time and money to support this beautiful home. Thank you, all of you, for coming to hear some of my stories. This has been a very special day for me, because when I was a child, I would come here every New Year's Eve and every Easter to celebrate holidays with my step-grandmother Margit and my family and my sisters, and we would all come down from New York City, which is where I grew up, in Manhattan. I'd just like to share a couple of things, or reinforce a couple of things that Cheryl was saying, and spin off a few anecdotes off of what Cheryl was saying. She's absolutely correct that Margit loved and lived for her horses, her Hungarian half-bred horses. She loved entertaining, and she loved books. So Margit basically split her time between the East Coast, mostly in the winter, and then would go out to the Bitterroot Stock Farm in Hamilton, Montana, where we, as in my sisters and I, have inherited a continuously operating ranch dating from 1886 that was started by Margit's grandfather, Marcus Daly, who made his money eventually in copper. So she would spend Christmas with us and then come down to Mount Aventine, and then we would come down for New Year's. We'd come down for the February long weekend. We would come down for Easter. And just to give you a couple of ideas of how much she loved her horses, first of all, she never really sold them. She tried to sell them, and would have people look at them, and then for whatever reason, she basically said, no, this won't really work out. The horse needs to stay with me. And that was literally up until her death. I remember riding and using the stables down here, and we would go riding around the property, and in particular when it was wintertime, in the indoor arena that you see, through the woods where there's that big blue building. But just to give you an idea of how much she loved her horses, she inherited a beautiful property in Montana that I go out to every summer. My sisters now live out there, and I will eventually be probably moving out there at some point in 5 or 7 years myself, just to be with family. She had the opportunity to live in many beautiful homes out on her property. And where did she live? She lived in a 1-bedroom flat cabin in the middle of a ranch, so she could be around her horses. And she could hear them nickering and neighing, and she would feed them. And she had other animals. She had goats and sheep wandering around, and sometimes the horses would wander around right in front of her little cottage. I mean, this isn't for a countess who had an apartment in Sutton Square in New York City. She lived in a very small, very simple home, and that's part of who Margit was. She was very unassuming in many, many ways. So she really did love her horses. She also loved entertaining, both in Maryland and in Montana. And I remember as a child here, there would be these vast dinner parties that went on late into the night. We were never invited to the dinners. We were occasionally invited to sit at the dining room table for lunch. And even that was exceptional. But more important than her entertaining, and I was telling this to a number of people, she had an ability to speak to absolutely anybody, whatever their level and lifestyle in life, their work, and she got along with the ranch hands in Hamilton. She'd go down to the local bar and drink whiskey or whatever it was with the best of them. She was supremely educated, so she could converse about all sorts of subjects, and the home that I own in Montana, that I share with my sisters in Montana, has countless numbers of her books. So, I mean, she was exceptionally well read. But I do remember both in Maryland and Montana having these wonderful dinner parties. The children, for example, were never allowed in this room, but this was used very frequently after the dinner parties wrapped up, and, you know, cigarettes would get pulled out and drinks would get pulled out, and then we'd be sent upstairs. So there were actually a couple of, just a little thing, there were a couple of rooms we were absolutely not allowed to go into as children. This was one of them, and to my knowledge, I was never in Margit's bedroom. We were never allowed to go there either, and that was sort of completely separate. So that's a section of the house that I was not familiar with. And then lastly, I'd just like to say that she did love her books, as we've already mentioned. She was an inveterate book reader, and she read books, and we have books of hers in 4 languages. I speak fluent French, Hungarian, and English, and still do, and my children speak Hungarian. My parents never taught us German, and Margit often spoke German, which is the 4th language I'm referring to. My parents never taught us German because that was the language they used when they wanted to keep secrets from us. My father also spoke Italian and Spanish and Romanian and a number of other languages, and basically figured out that if we knew French fluently, we could pretty much understand what he's saying if he was sharing a secret in Italian. So he used German as sort of the secret language to keep information away from us. So couple of anecdotes about my personal memories of Mount Aventine. As I say, we always came down at Easter, we always came down New Year's Eve, and then for a couple of long weekends in February. My step-grandmother would start by spending Christmas with us in New York City. She and my biological grandmother, my father's mother, we all spent Christmas together in New York City, and they got along famously. There was never an issue about them. So my step-grandmother was there, my grandmother was there, my aunts and uncles were all in Christmas in New York. And I don't really remember much about New Year's Eve with one exception. It's that we would saddle up the horses New Year's Eve, we'd take them into the arena, and then we would carry champagne flutes riding on her horses in the arena to ring in the new year. So, and as I say, when I asked my sisters for their memories, that was one of the first things that came up too. My 2 sisters and I shared I think it's called the Red Room upstairs. That's where we were. As I mentioned, we were normally not invited to the evening parties. And whenever we came down, my step-grandmother would complain to my mother about, oh my gosh, how the toilet paper goes so fast when everybody's around here. Easter was also special. We'd go to church, and maybe it was David who described Margit as extra. I'm not sure that I would have come up with that word, but to me, Easter was something so over the top that she put together for us every time we came down for Easter. She would invite kids from all over the neighborhood that somehow, I don't know how she knew them, but we always had, Easter egg passing eggs, from one spoon to the other races and sack races and things like that. And she would, you didn't even have internet, so I don't know how she got it, but she would buy Godiva chocolates, these big mammoth Easter eggs that had all sorts of little Easter chocolates inside and toys and stuff like that, and little Easter eggs and big Easter eggs and all sorts of stuff hidden around the front part of the house and down into the woods between the arena and here. And I mean, I have wonderful memories of doing these Easter egg hunts at Easter time. And I also remember, since I grew up in Manhattan at the time, there probably weren't that many flowers. Now Manhattan has lots more, flowering pots and things like that. But I do remember the daffodils and the crocuses emerging right around Easter. And I'm relatively new to Maryland. I moved here 3 years ago. And I have some lovely villages or neighborhoods I walk in behind where I live in DC. And one of the first things that struck me when I moved here to Maryland, in the springtime you can smell chives. And that immediately brought me back here to Maryland again, because I remember in the springtime that sort of chivey smell, and we'd actually pick it, and you could smell it and eat it. You could even eat it. So those are a couple of little memories. My step-grandmother always said, children should be... yes, thank you. Thank you, I was blanking out. Seen and not heard. And my sisters and I do recall that we would be eating at the dining room table at lunchtime, and then for whatever reason, we'd get into what's called a fou rire in French, which is this absolutely, once you start laughing, it becomes infectious among the sisters, and you can't stop. And then it gets worse and worse. And my step-grandmother really did not like that, and then would send us up to our bedrooms or sit on the stairs in quiet. And she also threatened us by saying that there's this horrible pomonki monster that wears these enormous boots. And she pulled out the boots. I saw them. And they were like that high. And what I didn't realize at the time is that they're water therapy boots for horses.
Oh.
But she would pull them out and say, okay, here's the pomonki. And she'd actually go down to the river's edge and do footprints there. So she said, okay, if you're not behaving, the pomonkis are going to get you and take you and lock you up, so you better start behaving. It was not until many, many, many years later that I realized that she was referring to a Native American Maryland group. But so anyway, we always remember the pomonki boots. I have lots of wonderful memories of this home. It's been an absolute pleasure to me to come here and speak with you today. I'm delighted that this has become a museum. I plan on becoming a member, and bringing my children down at some point, and friends that I have in the DC area who would love to see this. I also know that my aunt, Eva Bessenyey, my step-grandmother, Margit, who I was not named after, by the way. It just, Margit is a very common Hungarian name. And my father would be smiling down on me, knowing that we're trying to keep or maintain and inform a family legacy, that this was a part of my heritage that I want to remember. Sadly, we were not able to keep Mount Aventine in the family for various financial reasons, and my father and my aunt ultimately agreed to basically sell Mount Aventine and keep the Bitterroot Stock Farm in Hamilton, Montana as an operating ranch. And as I mentioned in the beginning, I have my sisters who now live out there. I go out there 3 or 4 times a year and will eventually move out there. There's a home out there that is our family home that is very reminiscent of this home to me. It's very similar in style. It reminds me a lot. So I just feel so very happy. But anyway, so in terms of legacy, while I'm very sad that we were not able to keep Mount Aventine, my sisters and I are, having inherited the Bitterroot Stock Farm since my parents died, we are actively involved in trying to preserve that legacy. And Margit's Hungarian horses were trained both here and in Hamilton, Montana. And there are Hungarian horses on the ranch. My sisters own a couple of Hungarian horses. I don't own a horse. But we continue to operate the ranch. It raises cattle, we raise hay, and we keep some of the Hungarian horses there. And I guess just thank you for listening to my story. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. As I say, my memories here of I was here as a child. This has been 45 years since I've been back to this house. Oh, wow. So it's really a special opportunity for me to revisit this beautiful home. Thank you.
Thank you. Join me in thanking her. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. It was really wonderful for you to share, for us to hear those stories, those very personal stories. And we're so happy to know that you're going to join and be a member. That's great as well. And I'd like to also ask if there's anyone here who's not a member. We do have a table in the Grand Foyer that has the registration forms for joining as a member. We'd love to have you do that. And also, if you are interested in serving on any committee, whether you drive a tractor or like to work on the house, we'd love to have your help. So please remember that. If you have not, is Freddie Fox here? Are you going to introduce her? We do have. I wanted to introduce our equestrian, Freddie Fox, who has been showing us how to. Pardon me? Foxwell, who has been showing us how to side saddle, ride. Is she coming in or not? Okay, well, I'd like everyone to, go out on the porch, and she is welcome to answer any questions about her riding attire, the saddle, or anything about, how to ride side saddle, which not very many people do these days. I'd like you, if you have not already visited the exhibit on the second floor, please do so. And then finally, is there anyone else here who has a memory they would like to share about the Countess? Yes, please.
Sure, Daddy. So I'm Tierra Edelin.
Come on up, please.
Oh gosh. I was enjoying you way back there. Here, Dad. I'm Tierra Edelin, and this is Keach Edelin. This is my daddy. And take it away, Dad.
One of the, I guess, trainers over here, very distinguished, educated gentleman, coat and tie. And he had a son that had graduated from medical school in the middle 70s, and he worked in my father's office. So we knew that because we had a bunch of horses and we were fox hunters. So we would come over here and visit her, and she was so intrigued by the way we trained our horses, because she was a big trainer and really did everything by the book. We didn't. We were fox hunters, and we had to be ready for dogs and snakes and bangs and people blowing their horns, and our jumps. We had like 10 jumps, the coops and the spreads and everything in our backyard. So this gentleman would come over to our house, and he would watch us with our horses, and then he'd come back and tell the Countess. She would call us, and the two of us would come over here and talk to her, because he had to know everything we did. And we were looking for a trail horse. She said, I have one, an Arabian, and y'all can have it. When you get finished, just bring it back to me. And we thought, well, that was great.
So that was part of her not wanting to sell anything.
Yeah.
And his name was Carew. And Carew was not like our horses. He was, you could tell he was a pet of Countess Bessenyey's. He was not one of our fox hunters, and he was it took us about a month to realize, wow, as gorgeous as he was, he just didn't even like going through a mud puddle, let alone some of the nasty things we did going through. And that was the deal. Like, Countess Bessenyey was, that's fine. Here, take him. She had a fabulous rapport with my father, and that was the deal. Didn't work out. You got to bring him back. And she was very, very adamant about, I don't care. You have to bring him back. You don't sell him anywhere. He's mine. And you're okay. All right. We brought him back. But I remember us coming here. It was in the 70s. I remember, of course, again, it was in the 70s. I was in my teens, so things were a little different. But I remember the rooms being kind of flipped. There was more of a seating room over here. Someone had brought tea out, and she actually, Countess Bessenyey, poured my tea. I remember the sugar cubes because to me, I was like, oh my God, my horses. So of course a couple of those sugar cubes, I'm so sorry, I took them. They ended up in my vest pocket because I was like, okay, wait, I'm gonna give them to the horses. But it was spectacular. Of course Daddy had different tea than I had. Please do tell us the tea you had.
Yeah, it came from like a, regular size, nice size, probably a vodka bottle.
Yeah.
It had herbs and
No, you called them what?
weeds.
Okay.
Yeah, I always told her they were Montana or Hungarian sagebrush and weeds, and she would correct me and tell me, no, they are special herbs, and they have to stay in the bottle for months and months before they could be used. But thank goodness, every time I came, I got a drink of this, and it was really different and very nice. But that's when she would have Tiara leave the room. But then,
Okay, all right, yeah, fair.
but then when we
fair.
explained to her about the training of the horses, where we shot our shotguns around our horse. If we were shooting clay pigeons, I wanted the kids there on their horses. When we cut grass, the kids got their horses and rode around the tractor. Our jumps had balloons and ribbons all over it. So the horses were prepared for anything. Nothing spooked them. And so this gentleman who came to our house many times would come back and tell her, and then she would call again and again, come over, tell me some more. And one thing she was intrigued by, we had a picnic table, it was probably from here to that wall, 20, 25 feet long, came off of a Navy ship. And he was talking about the jumps and all, and I said, well, you're sitting on one of the jumps. I said, the horses go over there, then they come and jump the picnic table. And he's saying, they can't. You can't jump your horses over your picnic table. And we said, well, get out and watch. Well, he told her, and she called, said, I want to know the thing about the picnic table. So then we finally told her, said, your horse isn't trained like ours. So we brought Carew back, and then she took us down in the, the arena down here to show me a horse, and she said, well, this one will really suit your needs. It will do anything. And it was a gorgeous dressage horse. And I told her it would take me entirely too long to train it to fox hunt. And she got a kick out of that. She said, well, you don't want it? She said, you can use it and bring it back when you get finished. I said, no, it'd take too long to train it. But she was a gracious person, welcomed us into her home, and every time we came over, it was really something.
And that's where you got that from me. The one word I can explain Countess Bessenyey is extra. Like her mannerisms, her whole persona was just extra. Her generosity, her kindness to some teen me, that stole sugar cubes from her, from our horse, and her horse, though, because when we went outside, they went back into the family. But she was just extra. And I think she kind of liked my dad a little bit.
I think so too.
But yeah, she was a very gracious, wonderful woman. So
and we were better off knowing her.
Yes. Good woman.
Thank you. What a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the Countess. Is there anyone else who would like to share any memories? If not, we'll continue. Well, it was our pleasure. I'm on behalf of the board. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Margit Bessenyey Williams, for being here, the key person to share their memories with the Countess. And would you raise your glass with me, and let's all say, I've got here to the Countess. Thank you all.